All right, Kim, well, thank you for sharing your story with us. I know this is kind of a sad one and maybe a hard one for you to share. So I was wondering if you could just kind of take us back to what happened to your husband, or if you want to start with a little bit about him.
So my husband was 49. He went in to have a surgery called triple anthrodesis, and we kind of found out over time, but more specifically in November, that he had some kind of bone issue. So his ankle bones were fused together as one whole bone. So it would have been like a series of 4 more surgeries after this first one. So they wanted to put a rod in, and the rod was so that he would have motion this way. And then this time, now he would have had the second surgery for it to go that way, and then on. So he had the surgery at Penn State, Hershey, and it was successful. We came, home, and he was hooked up to a nerve blocker, like a nerve blocker machine, and it went kind of malfunctioned when we were leaving the hospital. So I was nervous, and I said, I think we need to go back, and he was adamant he didn't want to be in the hospital anymore, just wanted to go home. So we got home, got him in the house, propped his leg up. We talked all night, watched TV. My youngest son had tore his ACL in November, so he had surgery the 3rd of January, so right around, so they both were home. Yeah, so he was recuperating from having the surgery, and so then that night he kept kind of waking up and kind of maybe lucid dreaming, I think, but he just kept saying like he saw Nirvana and how beautiful it was, and he went back to sleep. Well, he said, I hope I have this dream again. So he went back to sleep, and he woke up and had the same dream, and he said this time he went to heaven. So I'm thinking like, wow, that's weird. So I'm writing down what he said, because he was so adamant about what he saw. So he wanted mashed potatoes and chicken that night. Okay. So I got up in the morning, and I was making him mashed potatoes and chicken for, like, he's gonna have it for brunch. So I guess it was maybe around 8:30 or so, and I went in to tell him it was time for his medicine for the anticoagulant shot, and I laid down beside him and said, hey, it's time to get up, and he didn't answer. So I just kind of looked over, and there's just one single tear like rolling down his cheek, and I jumped into action. And I just jumped over him, started CPR, because in the back of my mind I kept thinking, this is a man who's had both knees replaced. He was in a wheelchair for 2 years. He had to have had some kind of, I guess, venous thrombosis, or he had to have had some kind of trauma. Yeah. So when he didn't respond, I just went into action, because I'd always been afraid of that. And he was heavy, he was obese as well. So, and that was just from not being able to move over the course of about 13 years. So I started screaming for my oldest son, who was home, and thinking back now, like, he didn't believe me. He didn't want to accept, so I'm screaming like, call 911, pound the doors, get help. And he calls 911, and they get there maybe about 5 minutes, and they start working on it immediately. And he died maybe 4 or 5 times in the house. They got his pulse back, it's a light pulse. Got him to the hospital, and he was in a coma for, so that was January 11th, he had the surgery. January 12th, he went into a coma, and then 10 o'clock, January 13th, he passed away. So they say, well, it was a heart attack and a blood clot, massive blood clot. Yeah. So it's tragic, but in my mind, I just couldn't see him having the surgery. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't feel right for him to have that surgery. And at work, that's all I kept talking about. Like, you know, I don't feel comfortable with it. It doesn't feel right. But he was adamant about having the surgery because he was going to be coaching as a part of the Junior Tornadoes. So in our, you know, in Lancaster, we have the Junior Tornadoes Junior League football team. So I guess apparently, I'm not sure the details, but somehow along the line, the money was taken and they were no longer going to have the program anymore after like 30 years of having it. So he and another community friend decided that they were going to take this on and a part of the rec center and develop what was needed to get the program back on its feet. So actually, when we went into surgery, he had the plans, like he was still working on all of that, and he gave it to me. You know, I'm holding all of his stuff, and so he wanted to have the surgery because he wanted to be able to walk. He wanted to be able to stand. He said he wanted to be able to get down and actually show the kids. Yeah. You know, he was losing weight. He was doing all the right things. But I think that he was already compromised. And my personal opinion is that I think the medical personnel, the doctors, should have red flagged him. In the past, I always went with him to his doctor's appointments and the surgeries and all that. But this school year, we had a lot of changes and things like that. So I was more focused on being at work, and I didn't go with him. So I think had I gone, you know, you go back and you're thinking, had I done this and had I done that, but I do feel like if we would, well, I know that for sure, if we wouldn't have had the surgery, he would be here right now. Yeah. So, you know, we don't know how God works. Maybe it was supposed to happen this way, but it sucks. So, yeah, I guess the beauty in it was that he died in the hospital, and there were so many people coming. They said it was limited to 4 people. Well, probably after, you know, the 20th person, they're like, just Mr. Gantz is here, Mr. Gantz is here. So I wouldn't be afraid to say there were maybe 100 and some. There were kids in corners, you know, crying. I didn't even realize, I mean, I knew my husband was important, but I didn't realize his impact until he passed away. And phone calls, and they say there were like 2 busloads of kids basketball from Philly and New York, and we had phone calls from people overseas, and so he was phenomenal. And I have chills, but I'm thinking like, wow, I was married to this man all these years, you know, and together for, he was 25. And even though we did this thing together, you know, like I was a part of the basketball teams with him, his AAU teams, and, you know, I did all of that. I didn't know how far his hand reached outside of Lancaster. Yeah. So it was amazing to see. Whatever he did, I followed and supported. What I did, you know, he followed and supported. But I wasn't. He was very boisterous, very blunt, very straightforward. He's that person who's going to tell, he had no filter. No filter. He will tell you exactly how he feels. And I grew to appreciate that because there's so many people that put on false pretenses, you know. So even though, I mean, he was blunt and he gave it to me just as well as he did everyone else. I would laugh because they were like, Kim's here, he's not going to, I'm like, he gets me too. He gets me too. But it's been bittersweet. It's wonderful to see how many people he really touched. I mean, up until like 2-3 nights ago, a cousin that's now was in Venezuela, is now in Puerto Rico, called sobbing, like at 2 o'clock in the morning. And this cousin I've met before, but I had no idea how much my husband meant to him, because it wasn't like a cousinship where they were together all the time. Right. So I let him talk, and I was just floored with some of the stuff that he was telling me that my husband helped him to get through. I was like, wow, he is a good, you know, he's a good guy.
Can you kind of talk about some of the things, because he was so involved in the community, what were some of the things that he did? So I know he worked as an ISS teacher?
Yes,
for
he
school
did
district like
several
this?
things
Yeah.
in the city.
It was a big long list that I saw.
Several things, yeah. So he would have like 4 jobs at the same time. He was always with children. So it was, he worked with like teenage, I guess they call it court, I say appointed children, kids who were kicked out of school, or like the Prescott House, places like that. So he always did that kind of work. When we first got together in my early 20s, he worked at the Boys and Girls Club. He also worked at the Prescott House, I think kind of Burley maybe in there, and Lincoln ISS. So when he started at Lincoln is when I was also at Price. So I started working in 1999 and he was around 2000, 2001. So we got into the same, well, I was in the field, and I guess he was always like a kind of a rec kid, that kid that went to the boys club and all of that. So it was natural for us to bond that way. So I guess you could say,
you were little, right?
yes,
Okay.
and that's funny because when I didn't know our parents were in a band together. Until after I know, it's eerie. I mean, it is weird. I'll tell you that one a little bit. But so he was always involved with kids, and one of the things that I really thought was an excellent thing that he did was at Lincoln he started something called the Gentlemen's Club, and it's funny because I just saw on Facebook where someone else had that idea, and I'm like, my husband did that. Time ago. But so he taught kids bills. You know what I mean? Like how to pay rent and how much things, the real stuff
life
that
skills,
we need to be able, life skills that we need to know. Now, 15 years later, I'm seeing how important it was because those kids reached back when he passed away. So, and they shared things, and I'm thinking like, wow, if he would have been alive, I'm wondering just what he would have accomplished, because like I said, it seems like it was just a little bit of time, and at 49 I think he did more than a lot of people achieve in their lifetime. He was always on time, always task oriented and organized. And one of the things that he did do, and I think this is important for me to say because it leads to my son Kobe, in 1999, my husband and I decided that we wanted to do an AAU team, the basketball. Now it's really a thing, but back then it wasn't really that. It was the high school basketball teams that got most of the time, not AAU. So he started several basketball teams, and each time he started it, he would partner with a friend that had the same idea. And because he was so strict and goal-oriented and wanted things this way, every single group that he started was successful. I mean, we have walls filled with trophies, and it's just amazing. But the greatest part is my children played for their father, so, and their friends and cousins. So he kind of cultivated this team that ended up being 2016 McCaskey's run for state title. That was my son Kobe. So that team was my husband's team. Great. And it was nice for him to get to see that come to fruition. So he's been very active even up until his last breath. Honestly, his last breath was the community. What I'm learning and what he showed me is that it's always about the kids, and it's always about letting God handle the payback. You know, just, I would get angry with things, you know, would go a certain way, or if I felt like people weren't treating him right, and he would be friends with them still. You know, I would be angry, like, they're not going to do this. And he's just like, well, you know, that's not for us to judge. It's not for us to you know, care about. It'll be handled, and it always was. Even to the point where, like I said, I had people calling me nonstop and emailing and iMessaging, apologizing for the way they treated my husband. His hand, he was really involved here. And it didn't, like I said, it didn't really hit me until I watched a community grieve, and I was in awe. I had a wonderful marriage and a wonderful husband, and I'm not saying that we didn't argue, you know, I'm not saying I didn't slam the door and run out, you know, I'm not saying that any of that didn't happen, but we worked well together because it was always about the kids, and it was always about forgetting the adults because we are already messed up, you know, and it takes us too long, you know, to change our ways, but the children are the ones that can take us where we need to go in the future, you know, and to bring us together. That's all I've done. I mean, it's always kids, and that's where we really connected. I think he was an injured, hurt child. You know, I have some history of growing up, you know, that wasn't always the happiest memories. So we kind of gelled that way, kind of had the same story. And then when we started dating, I met his mother, who said, "Who are you?" And I said, Kimberly States. And she said, "States? Is your father Richard States?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh, your dad was in a band with, you know." And I'm like, okay. Wait, so she pulls out this picture, and there's my dad at like 19, cute. And it was funny because he looks, you know, that was my dad and his father. So my dad plays the drums and the guitar. So we laughed about it. I was like, just destined.
So did most people call your husband Booby? Or
yes, his name was Kabooby. So apparently there's a camel that's in a cartoon from the 70s. Okay. I looked it up. And his name is Kabooby, the camel. So I guess my husband favored a camel. I have no idea. But they called him Kabooby, and then it just went to Booby. So it was funny because when I introduced him to my dad, and my husband hated his name. His name is Collins, which I think is a lovely name. So he wanted to be called Booby. I'm like, no. Introduce you to my dad, say Booby. So I said Collins, and I said, and when we introduce, I say Collins, okay? That's the way it's going to be. So he let me get away with it. But
that's great.
He is a character.
So why have you decided now you're going back to school again? Yes. So what kind of prompted that decision?
Well, I was always going back. I actually started in 2005. And my husband has an older daughter. She's 30 now, but she got pregnant when she was 15. So I raised my grandson. So I stopped going to school and kept eyes on her and raised our grandson. He's 13 now.
You shared a lot of kind of what you've gone through and your grieving process on social media.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about why? I mean, how does that help you to kind of get it out there?
Well, I didn't know it would, but it did. And that's what I mean. I went in my room, shut the door, and I stayed there for a long time. And I kept getting, you know, messages from people saying things like, I lost my husband too, and I didn't realize how many widows there are. I mean, why would I care? Yeah. I didn't. So I realized that there are so many widows in Lancaster, and people just kept reaching out and saying, "Thank you for sharing this," or, you know, "Your honesty is this," and I'm looking like, but to me, this is just the way Kim is. I'm always just straightforward, you know, just how I feel. And people kept asking, but so I would stop and not write anything, and people would keep prompting me, you know, and saying, you know, "Are you okay?" And then I started getting stories about my husband from people. But then I also started thinking, people know us, you know, we're twins, people know about us, we're from here, but people don't really know me, you know. So I wanted to reveal that hurt. I was angry, and I wanted other people to share my pain. I wanted the support in that pain because it was so deep. And when I really thought about it, I thought, wow, I had a damn fairy tale life, didn't I? You know, a happily ever after. So I wanted people to feel it. I wanted people to see I'm real, I bleed, you know, I do F-bombs sometimes too. You know what I mean? Like, I'm real, and I'm really devastated, and I'm really angry, and I don't know what to do with this. So I grabbed the community, and I needed them. And that's why I said, that's what prompted me to go back for my master's, because in 2020 I was retiring. My husband and I were continuing the foundation part, and this time we would have the financial stability that we needed to get it up and running. So I decided that I needed to memorialize my husband. Because of what he did contribute to Lancaster, I feel that he made changes. He did things for kids. He gave them, he did all these things that I didn't necessarily know about. So I wanted to put all of my energy into what we started. So we started a foundation called The Spice of Life, and that is for kids. It will be for kids, and not just sports. It will be if a student needs books, if a student needs to maybe go on a field trip and can't afford to go, or scholarship. So if there's a kid that wants to go to a trade school or wants to check the water chemical levels in the Conestoga, or whatever they want to do, we would provide that for them. And nothing huge. I mean, who knows what it could become, but just a support. What he always did anyway.
Right.
So I wanted to put all my energy into that. The master's program at Eastern Mennonite, I haven't been accepted yet, but I'm just going through the application process. I chose Eastern Mennonite because some of the teachers at school recommended it, and it's a 2-year program, so I should be able to accomplish it. But I thought this time around, I've always been the teacher, and people kind of see teachers a certain way, but I've never really been fully involved in the parental part of it. I've always been in the classroom. I'm the one that's trying to get the student to come in and be okay and do all that. But I've never gotten to see the kids from home through it. So I decided that I wanted to become a parent and student advocate. So I guess kind of like an educational consultant. If a parent is having difficulty understanding how to, do math, or kind of maybe tutoring too, but also going into the schools to be a liaison between the teacher and the parent. Because sometimes the language, you just don't understand, the education, and it's ever changing. So I thought this time around, I'm 47, I think it's time to support parents and students. So that's what I'm doing.
So with the Spice of Life Foundation, is there a way, is it running enough that people could contribute? Is there a website?
Yes,
how can people find out more about it?
So we, and I can't pretend I know exactly what I'm talking about, but I will say, we have tax ID number, we have a website for it. We could start helping kids now.
Yeah.
Now, because we move slowly with it, I'm not ready to commit to scholarships and stuff yet, just because I don't know enough about it, and it took me, I'm just now coming from out of the covers. So honestly, that's why I said I have makeup on and my hair is done, but that's because she did it today, because I've been going around looking pretty crazy. But now I feel energized, I think, and I will celebrate him. So that's my intention for the rest now, is to support what he always did. He always supported the parents and the kids. I always teach my kids and my students, if anyone gives you just a second of their time, then they didn't have to do that, So you appreciate that and you honor that. So that's what I'm trying to do.